my name is Jim Vieira. I'd like to speak to a strange aspect of the giant phenomena, a very specific notation that is reported in the Bible and other esoteric documents of 6 fingers and 6 toes. Now, this is a rare genetic condition that exists in some humans, but it is portrayed as supernatural, divine, or malevolent in sources all around the planet. And I'm going to dig deep into this mystery, a mystery that you'll see that many academics have independently dove into and are basically asking questions about. I think it's a good example that this mystery is worthy of further investigation. Now, I'll let the audience make what they will of the evidence, but I feel personally this shows disconnected cultures talking about the same strange and specific things that really make a compelling case that there's something to the story. So I have been studying this giant phenomena for about 2 decades now and have pieced together my work in a book with my co-author Hugh Newman. I'm going to start today with a biblical quote, Samuel 21:20. "And there was yet a battle in Gath, where was a man of great stature, that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number, and he was also born to the giant." So it's specifically noted that this giant had 6 fingers and 6 toes. You also have at the Library of Ashburnabal in Iraq, modern day Iraq, these ancient texts that were portraying a story of human origins. And one of the tablets talks about polydactylism. In fact, the first mention of polydactyl in written form is found in Suma Ibzu, an Assyrian compendium of 24 tablets with approximately 2,800 tetralogical omens. Most of the tablets were found in the Ashburnabal Library in Nineveh. And here I am at the British Museum with some of these cuneiform texts. Its 3rd and 4th tablets contain a total of 15 omens pertaining to polydactyl, 6 fingers on one hand and 6 fingers on both hands, 6 toes on one foot and bilaterally, as well as 6 digits on both hands and feet. It basically tells you what each means. One is a positive omen, one is a negative if you have a child that's born with one or the other. So in the academic paper, Polydactyl and Development, Inheritance, and Evolution, the authors point out the following. Cuneiform texts on polydactyl votive child foot with 6 toes from Sumer, 26th century BC. And the inscription says, "What am I to do for my child with 6 toes?" Here is the votive with 6 toes, and here is the inscription that describes the condition and what the omen means. We also have this strange being in medieval times with 9 toes. So it's in the Arnstein Bible of a polydactylous man exhibiting 9 toes on each foot. Here is a newspaper clipping from the 60s, and you see just incredible amount of digits. A rare case of cross-polydactyl in humans combined preaxially and postaxially asymmetrical polydactyl with 6 complete fingers, as well as an extended thumb on the right hand, plus 7 complete fingers on the left hand, and 7 toes on each foot, total of 27 digits. And, you know, is this just a genetic fluke that keeps reemerging in humans because it's associated, once again, with the divine and the supernatural? Or is it an inheritance from a parent race that is sometimes associated as giant or having multiple digits? That is sometimes the esoteric viewpoint. And the great sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, actually, I went through all his readings, 25,000 readings, 14 million words cataloged at the Virginia Beach Library. And I found this account where Cayce describes Mu Zuin, who traveled to the Gobi Desert from the lost Pacific continent of Lemuria in 9026 BC as being 6 foot tall, blue-eyed, hair dark gold, hands 6-fingered. He's not portrayed as a giant, but in this area of the Gobi Desert, he is portrayed as having 6 fingers and blonde hair and blue eyes, which is unique to the area. And here's the Gobi Desert region. We also find Pliny the Elder mentioned the encounter between the Romans and the Seres at Taprobane, who were the Chinese. They exceeded the ordinary human height, had flaxen hair and blue eyes, and made an uncouth sort of noise by way of talking. So blonde hair and blue-eyed is not what we think of as Chinese people. And in fact, the Tarim Basin mummies were found several years ago, which were, I think, around 2,000 or 3,000 BC was when they were when these people lived, and they had red hair, blue eyes, and blonde hair, and their height was between 6 feet and 6 feet 6 inches tall. So Casey has these ideas about Atlantis existing in the middle of the Atlantic, Lemuria being a lost continent in the Pacific. But when you go through his readings, there's always some corroborative evidence. You know, it seems totally off the wall when you hear his stuff. But then you have ideas and evidence like this that come forward that, like, maybe there were different peoples living in the region that tell a different story of our past. So 6 fingers and 6 toes is found at different sites in the American Southwest. This is Newspaper Rock at Utah, an ancient petroglyph site. And you find many hands and feet with 6 fingers and 6 toes here, including these 6-toed petroglyphs. This one's particularly interesting. Look at how big this one is, and it has 6 toes. So it's portrayed specifically and specifically noted in this ancient rock art. This is also a McCornell Ranch in Utah. Look at the giant feet and look at the hands, 6 toes on each. A recent National Geographic article was called "Extra Fingers and Toes Were Revered in Ancient Culture." The Pueblo people of Chaco Canyon decorated their great houses with 6-toed footprints and sandal-shaped art. Here's one of the kivas at Chaco Canyon. In fact, in room 30 at Pueblo Bonito, they found a skeleton of a foot that had 6 toes on it. And here on the wall at Pueblo Bonito, you find these 3 large footprints with 6 toes each. What you can't see over here is a normal size 5-toe footprint that is much smaller. So, initially intrigued by the divine powers attributed to the polydactyls among the Maya, researchers led by anthropologist Patricia Crown of the University of New Mexico conducted a comprehensive view of evidence for the condition of the canyon's sacred Pueblo Bonito site. They found this cast of a 6-toed individual, and basically the conclusion is that there was special burials and just a reverence for these people who had 6 fingers and 6 toes. And we find this in Colorado, in eastern Oklahoma. The 6-toed petroglyph is much larger than the others. This is recently sent to me by somebody who was hiking in a canyon in Utah. The 6-toed rock art is on the right. This is from an old geographical magazine, and it shows in Alton, Illinois, a rather large 6-toed petroglyph as compared to the 5-toed one. You find, you know, basically all the southwestern states have this rock art where there's 6 toes and 6 fingers portrayed. Here again is another one with 7 and 7, and there are some of those as well. This is in Utah. This is in Moab. This is in New Mexico. Yes, Kitty. My son must have thrown that in there. This is in Texas, actually. And at this site, there is this giant 5-toed footprint. It doesn't have 6 toes, but on the Park Service website, it says this: a large foot, often with 6 toes, is a common symbol depicted in petroglyphs and pictographs. What do you think this foot could mean? So that's what it says. You know, these professionals are asking this question. So why is it portrayed as particularly large? And then it seems to line up with the biblical passage about giants. This is from the Historical Collections of Georgia. It's from Doc Stevenson, and this is a series of rock art impressions he found. They comprise human feet from those 4 inches in length to those of great warriors, which measure 17.5 inches in length and 7 3/4 in breadth across the toes. What is a little curious, all the human feet are natural except this, which has 6 toes, proving him to have been a descendant of Titan. Another isolated example of a huge foot with 6 toes, and that's right in the middle at Track Rock Boulder right there. So in Morse's Geology in 1838, we have this account. In the state of Tennessee, 2 miles south of Brasstown on Enchanted Mountain, which is at the headwaters of the Tennessee River, are found impressed in the surface of the solid rock a great number of tracks. The human tracks are remarkable for uniformly having 6 toes each. One of these tracks is distinguished from the rest by its monstrousness, being of no less than 16 inches in length. Once again, unusually large footprint associated with this idea of 6 fingers and 6 toes. I've been looking for this site around Brasstown Bald and Enchanted Mountain. It hasn't been refound since 1838, but it's another site in these set of states around North Carolina, Tennessee, that have this representation of 6 fingers and toes. So Mooney was a researcher at the Smithsonian, and he recorded the Cherokee legend of Judaculla Rock. A legend describes the giant leaped down off his mountain to a creek below where he scratched the rock with his 7-fingered hands. And here is a representation of his 7-fingered hand right there. And the ancient belief of the Cherokee is that there was a giant who lived in the area with 7 fingers. So at Camp Crittenden in Arizona, we have this account from 1891. While digging for a commercial building, a giant stone coffin was uncovered. The project manager didn't want to open it until an expert was called in to examine the strange find. When finally opened, a granite case was found inside, which appeared to have held a body of a man at least 12 feet tall. A carving on the casing pointed to the fact that he had 6 toes and fingers. In Baja California, at the Coso site, we also have 6 fingers and 6 toes represented, but in a particularly interesting way. There was an ancient native tradition that there was a race of giants with 6 fingers and 6 toes that the peoples of the time, the indigenous peoples, warred with. And you'll see right here, this Joker-like being has 6 toes on his right hand. But also we have this 6-toed being at war with these 5-toed beings. And right here, 6 fingers, and he is littered with arrows. And this one right here, you'll see 6 fingers, and whoever this ancient person is, he is tuned up with a bunch of arrows, just trying to piece together if this ancient idea of a war between the 2 races occurred. So all around the world, you find the same phenomena. In a series of caves in China, we have the Buddha represented with 6 fingers on each of his hands. Now, once again, this idea of polydactylism is associated with malevolence and benevolence, with the divine and the supernatural. And the Buddha is represented with 6 fingers right here. And this is an interesting account from Madrid. There is one place in the world where the bulk of the population has 6 fingers on each hand, and some residents have 7. Very few have 5. The place is the tiny village of Cervera de Buitrago in an isolated section of the Madrid province. Citizens there are so accustomed to extra fingers that they regard a 5-fingered hand as normal. Now this, much like the Pueblo area in the southwest, there is a incidence of polydactylism that is much higher than the normal rate in the regular human population. The question is, was there an influx of ancient people to these areas and interbreeding that occurred that is displayed in the continued prevalence of polydactylism at this point? It seems to be the case. There's certainly a much higher prevalence in the American Southwest, and it's been noted in academic papers. Here you have a burial shroud from 100 AD, and the woman here has 6 toes on each foot. 12 in all. This is an ancient site of Ayin Ghazal, and what you're going to see is some of the oldest statues in the world are associated or they display polydactylism and androgyny, another strange topic that I'll get into at length in other talks. But right now I wanted to focus on this ancient settlement of Ayin Ghazal. So it first appeared in the MPPNB, which is the middle pre-pottery Neolithic B phase, and it's split into two phases. One starts in 10,300 before present and ends in 9950, while phase two ends in 9550 before present. So we have these super ancient statues at Ayin Ghazal, and I'll show you at Jericho as well, that have 6 fingers and or 6 toes. So in the Israeli Exploration Journal, the first Adam androgyny in the Ayin Ghazal bust, Erod Ziffer basically points to these statues as this parent race of humans. Now here is the foot with 6 toes from Ayin Ghazal, and this is what the sober academic says about these statues. It is proposed that the Ayin Ghazal statues represented deities. The polydactylism, a rare genetic syndrome, of the statues is viewed as a divine attribute, and based on cuneiform literature, identifies the two-headed busts as the likes of the gods Marduk and Ishtar. So Richard Barnett, his wife posthumously published his paper about polydactylism in the ancient world, and he explained at Ayin Ghazal the statues are a mark of a supernatural entity such as the biblical Rephaim, the race of giants. So this is what Erod Ziffer, the Israeli archaeologist, says. Drawing on Rolfson's interpretation, which understands the Ayin Ghazal statues as ancestral figures instrumental in shaping the historical identity of their makers, I would like to suggest that these statues represented mythical ancestors from the dawn of mankind, and that the two-headed busts among them represent the first human being, the androgynous prototype of humanity that had 6 fingers and 6 toes. So you have this idea being contemplated by academics. So here is the site of Jericho right here. And this is a pre-pottery Neolithic B site. So it's 10,700 to 8,000 years old. And once again, you have a 6-toed statue found at this site. And here's the ancient Tower of Jericho. And here it is right here, a representation of it. So you're finding that this polydactylism is represented in some of the oldest statues on the planet. At the Iron Age site of Tel Demii, it's at a Air Force base in Jordan. It's a protected site. And what they found here at this site was these 2 anthropomorphic statues that have 6, they're androgynous, and they have 6 fingers apiece. So another example of polydactylism in the ancient world. In Jordan, we also have a series of really superb dolmens that you find in the Caucasus and the British Isles and everywhere else. So it's attributed to these ancient builders, and were they associated with this lost race we're talking about, these supernatural beings. At Hamid Gadar in Israel, Jordan border, there's also this find from the Israeli Exploration Society Journal. The enormous right foot and the left hand depicted on the marble slabs each have 6 digits. Then we go over to Paracas and Peru, where we have elongated skulls. But we also have this big pot that represents polydactylism in the hands. Each one clearly has 6 fingers, and the feet, strangely, just have 5 toes each. So this is another example in a different part of the world. And a new study out last year actually said the following, this prehistoric polydactylism, biological evidence and rock art representation from the Atacama Desert in northern Chile. So this study, and here's the authors, went in Chile and Argentina and found a vast amount of sites with 6 fingers and 6 toes carved everywhere. You'll see some of the examples right there. This is the region. See all the sites that are numbered had rock art with 6 fingers and 6 toes. Here's some more of the representations of what we're talking about. So, moreover, this is quoted from the academic paper. Moreover, the broad dispersion of hands and feet in rock art images with polydactyl in Chile and Argentina could suggest that it was more frequent than currently documented in the bioarchaeological record. Now, I don't know if that is true or it's, just the case that this attribute was so thought of as divine and supernatural that it was portrayed over and over again. But it's nice to see, academics looking at this problem. Templo Mayor in Mexico City is an Aztec site. Here are the ruins of it right here. This is what it looked like in its heyday at Tenochtitlan. The entire area was surrounded by lakes Oaxaca. The entire area was surrounded by a great lake. And this is what the reconstruction looked like at the time. So here you have the lake all around the old city, and this is what modern day Mexico City, where it lies today. So right when you go in the temple, there are two murals of deities, and they both have 6 toes on each foot, oddly enough. So I took pictures of each of these, and I just found it really astonishing that right in the museum, you have once again, you have deities associated with this genetic condition, which is associated with giants. So there's another Aztec site right here with 6 fingers. And here is the Palenque ruins in Mexico. Here I am visiting a couple of years ago on a tour. And all around the site, this is from a Maya polydactylism academic paper, you find 6 fingers and 6 toes specifically noted. And you go over to Teotihuacan, and you find the same thing. In Mesoamerica, human representations with 6-digit hands and feet are identified in lithic sculptures from Palenque, clay model figures from Teotihuacan, and Zapoteca ceramics. So these beings or these entities are often displayed with 6 fingers and 6 toes. And here I am, I think with the same shirt, in an Olmec museum, and both those beings, these deities, have 6 fingers on their hands. You see right there. And oftentimes I'll travel to museums and I'll go, all around the world, and I'll find examples of this on Philistine coffins or in Sumerian places and different museums that have never been noted before. Like this androgynous being, this deity on the right from Ecuador, has 6 fingers clearly on the hands. Now this one has 5. This isn't like, oh, the artist screwed up. This is, like clearly being represented here. In Tulum, and there's a really beautiful place in Mexico, an ancient temple site, a Mayan temple site, you have the Temple of Frescoes. And in the backside of this temple, you have a 7-fingered painting. And this is an Etruscan fresco, and this deity, this is like a supernatural god who has to put on some pants, but it is noted in the academic journal that he has 6 fingers, once again, on each hand. And at the Getty Museum, you have this fertility goddess who, in this well-worn limestone representation of this ancient being, has 6 toes on each foot. Now, women would hold this fertility goddess and pray to this ancestral deity to have, a benevolent birth. And you got to ask, why is this being portrayed with 6 toes, this ancestor deity that is written about in academic papers and is super, super ancient? So the fertility goddess with 6 toes, implying superhuman qualities from southwestern Cyprus, goes back to a period of 3000 to 2500 BC. So these super ancient sites, these super ancient statues are all representing polydactylism. This is in Marlik, Iran. I believe it's 1900 BC, if I'm not mistaken, these ancient statues. Clearly 6 toes on every foot right here. And here's another one, 6 toes on every foot. And then you go over to Thailand, and at this rock shelter, this super ancient site, you find a hand that has 5 fingers right next to a 6 seven-fingered hand in an ancient cave site in Thailand on the other side of the world. Now, this idea of extra fingers and toes goes into mythology. Cuchulainn is a member of the Tuatha De Danann who showed up on the coast of Ireland. Some think, well, there are these stories that go back and talk about invasions before and after the Great Flood. And Cuchulainn was considered this divine, benevolent god, if you will. And he is specifically noted, I'll give this account here, each foot had 7 toes and each hand 7 fingers, the nails with the grip of a hawk's claw or a griffin's clench. So this is from this particular mythological academic paper, but you can go to Wikipedia to find out about Cuchulainn having 7 fingers on each hand. And what's notable about him is he was called the foam of the sea and showed up in metal craft along with the Tuatha De Danann, these mythical beings from a lost world who had advanced technology. And you go on the other side of the world to Lake Titicaca, where Viracocha emerged from the lake on a raft of serpents, the foam of the sea he was called, and he is portrayed with 6 fingers and 6 toes oftentimes as well. So you have these ancient beings from a lost world who show up, restart civilization, have supernatural abilities, and then there are specific notations about their abilities, the supernatural traits, and their polydactylism. This is from, it was found in 1938 by German archaeologists in Tibet. You see the backwards swastika, and the Buddha-like figure here has 6 fingers on his hands. This statue was made from axatite, meteoric iron, and you'll see he is associated with 6 fingers once again. So this is another example from Iran of 6 fingers on each hand. I'm just showing these examples all around the world to really make this case that it's not just a coincidence. So from 1000 to 650 BC, we have that sculpture there. This is the Irish giant from Strand magazine in 1895. I can't attest to the, reality of this any more than anybody else because it doesn't exist anymore. But what I can tell you is this giant was on display. It was sent around to carnivals and people paid to see it at the time in the late 1800s. But it had 6 toes on its right foot and was 12 feet tall. Here's an Egyptian coffin lid, clearly 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 fingers. Here in the Medical Journal of Malta, you have this account. Congenital malformations, a historical perspective. Polydactyl is evident in a handprint described from the Hal Saflieni hypogeum in Malta. So you have these ancient ruins all around Malta, and there is a 6-fingered handprint also on a wall here at the hypogeum. I spoke to the curator there, and they said they were aware that it's reported, but they've been unable to find where the handprint is now. So I'd like to go in there with some kind of, you got to get special permission, but some kind of technology to see if we can, refine this handprint. But once again, this land, this area that's associated with giants, Malta, just like Sicily and Sardinia, has 6 fingers and 6 toes associated with it. And also at the other temple of Hagar Kim, you have congenital malformations. You have a statuette that had 6 fingers associated with it. Here's a picture of the temple, super ancient temple. Before Göbekli Tepe was found in Malta, these were considered the world's oldest temples. And here are the statues I'm talking about. And we go over to Australia and we find, once again, these legends of giants, guardian spirits, androgynous beings. The ancient Australian Aborigines have an androgynous god as a creator god, just like the Zuni and native tribes do, or the beings Oannes and that show up in Sumeria and the other beings there, fish gods, they're considered androgynous. And even Viracocha in South America is known to be androgynous. Now, he is represented as male, but these beings are always portrayed as sexless beings who create humanity from the earth, in supernatural fashion. So once again, this idea is shared all around the planet. So you have this six-fingered guardian spirit right here. And this particular piece of rock art I've been unable to find, but I'll read it right here from 1959. For instance, a rock drawing found in New South Wales, Australia, shows a double-headed human male figure, 9 feet 6 inches long, with 6 fingers on the right hand. And I will say that just like the Ayin Ghazal statues, there are a lot of academics who point to androgyny being portrayed as a two-headed statue, as a male and a female. So you find this verified by academics, and it's all around the world. And this androgynous spirit being is 9'6" with 6 fingers on his right hand. And for me, I just try to I find a real interest in piecing together all this ancient rock art, myths and legends, and esoteric teachings, and try to make a case that this seems well beyond coincidence. You could say, oh, I don't know what the hell you could say about it, frankly, how you could really describe what is going on all around the planet with the myths and legends of giants, the association with polydactylism, and then the proof right in front over and over again. This isn't always just normal-sized beings. Often they're portrayed as giant, these cultures that had no connection with each other. So that's what kind of piques my interest in this matter. So here's another being. The one on the right, left has 5. This guy has 6 on each hand. This is a giant spirit being from Australia as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot. That is pretty specific. And our thoughts about Australia and the peopling of Australia are changing rapidly these days too. I'll read this account here that just came out. 2018, Aboriginal settlement in Australia was no accident. Aboriginal settlement in Australia was no accident twice. Purposeful voyaging on this scale relied on advanced cognitive, linguistic, symbolic, and technical capabilities. It would have required construction of watercraft and well-developed navigation technology, as well as planning and information sharing. Now, there was a multidisciplinary team of scientists that basically took on the study of how people populated ancient Australia. And oftentimes, to fit theories that don't work, scientists and academics come up with kind of ridiculous notions like, oh, these people must have been sent to this place after a flood. There was a hurricane and they were on a raft of reeds, and that's how they got to this island, and things like that, instead of maybe these ancient people had the ability to navigate. So you see a lot of confirmation bias in the alternative area and in modern day science, where I have this theory and let's ram the square peg in the round hole. But as many researchers have been suggesting, Australia looks like it was founded earlier by a much more sophisticated people. So here again we have 6 fingers on the hands of this being. I found this in the old literature from the 1800s. There were Aboriginals who came over to the mainland from an island they lived on, and they had these old drawings on bark. And one of the drawings was this strange being that has 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. This divine and supernatural being, this isolated race before they died out, basically portrayed, part of the mythology of the creation on this bark parchment, and it was recorded in old academic paper. So this is the kind of thing that, you piece it all together and it's like, whoa, and if you just read it individually, you say that's interesting. And what I'm trying to do once again is make this case and portray how ubiquitous this feature is. So at Matsing in Botswana, Africa, we have the emergence place of the great god that shows up, and he has 6 toes. The footprints of Lanao Laga Kwalbe is said to have belonged to an enormous man who, like Matsang is the original god, lived thousands of years ago. He was a 6-toed individual with massive feet. The footprint of one of these large feet was imprinted on a rock outside of Cadia. So here's the impression. The site was found in the 70s and it's being preserved now in Botswana. But it's the place of emergence of the giant, and he has 6 toes once again. And here's another example of it. Here is Credo Mutwa. He is a Zulu shaman, and he has ideas about the past, about extraterrestrial influences and things like that. He's a mystic and a shaman, and he says that 6 fingers and 6 toes are the mark of the supernatural Zulu god. He independently says this in his work, in his books. In Tanzania, you have this being with 2 hands, particularly large hands, that have 6 fingers on each. Now, this was brought to my attention by Michael Tellinger. I know Hugh Newman visited the site. There's this, what seems to be a giant footprint in South Africa. Now, I'm not claiming somebody stepped in the mud 200 million years ago, but maybe it is a representation by the indigenous peoples. Whatever it is, it's a giant footprint, and it actually has 6 toes. I think it's kind of quite striking to go along with the rest of the information I'm putting out there. So, all around French Polynesia and the Pacific, you find the same phenomena. You find statues, these creator gods, all throughout the Pacific Islands, just like this one here. So I think outside it's from the Austral Islands and outside a museum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-fingered gods. Terry Dahl is an explorer, he's a Norwegian like Thor Heyerdahl. I think he lives in Australia now. And he was on our show, Search for the Lost Giants, and I'm friends with Terry. And he said what got him interested was in giants was he would travel to all these Pacific Islands. All these statues had 6 fingers and 6 toes. They were associated with giants. And all the local people told him the legends of the giants inhabiting these islands. Like in Kirabati, you have the footprints of Tarawa. And the anthropologist I.G. Turbert says the following: the short account is a factual report without any personal comments or interpretations of the position of the 2 series of footprints appearing on Tarawa Atoll in the Gilbert Islands, as shown to me and explained by the old men of Tarawa. Here's a picture of the site. Here is one of the giant footprints right there. You see 6 toes. There it is right there. A little tough to see. The book describes in detail the evidence for the prehistoric giants and the record of the gigantic footprints. Here, various footprints can clearly be seen in the volcanic stone, some of them so huge as to seem impossible. Most have 6 toes on each foot. And here's one of the elders stepping into the stone right here. It's a giant footprint. This particular footprint is said to be the left foot. It sinks a good inch into the solid rock. A coral limestone has 12 toes and measured 3'9" to 4'6" from toe to heel. Its counterpart, the right foot, is reported to be near the village of Tenk and Ranga on Maina, a separate island in the Gilberts, some 20 miles to the southwest of Tarawa. So you have another footprint, the match of this 12-toed giant. Make of it what you want. I think it's, once again, pretty interesting. So in Fiji, this is from an archaeological report, you have a handprint on the cave wall that has 6 fingers. And you go over to Easter Island. Now, Georgia Lee was an archaeologist who did her thesis by spending many years on Easter Island. And she seemed to be particularly interested. She wrote The Rock Art of Easter Island. She was particularly interested in the idea of 6 fingers and 6 toes. And here's one of the figures from Ranu Rakuru on the island, and she displays it there. But she also points out that the mysterious Birdman has 6 fingers here. And right here, the arrow, this is from the Peabody Museum. It was taken from Easter Island, and Georgia Lee, the archaeologist, points out it has 6 toes as well. And we all know about the famous statues, and what is lesser known is some really amazing megalithic work there that looks like it was of the same style and vintage as what you find in Peru. So in Ponape, you have more of these megalithic buildings. I point out these structures because there is a megalithic Pacific, basically. There are structures around the Pacific Islands that some researchers think are leftovers from a lost continent, from a Lemuria, if you will. And this is on Nan Madol. And here is Tonga right here. And here is the Trilithon of Tonga, just really astonishing megalithic feat. And these islands, these isolated islands, are littered with this kind of megalithic building. At the Altamira Cave in Spain, you have super ancient rock carvings. They could be up to 30,000 years old. And right here you have a spirit being with 7 fingers. And here you have a hybrid antelope, gazelle, human. Sometimes shamans will portray like this, supernaturally, and he clearly has 6 fingers. And once again, you have this hybrid being. Sorry, I looked for the original in the Stockholm Museum. It's in the back room, so I have to go with this picture of it. But this, in the academic paper, it says this Greek figure, this hybrid figure, has a left hand, a huge left hand that has 6 fingers on it. And these winged siren hybrid beings are found from Anatolia to Greece in, I think, around 1500 to 2000 BC. They're cauldron holders, and they're often portrayed with 6 fingers on each hand. Now, my friend J.J. Ainsworth sent me this. This is a hybrid scorpion being, I don't even know what it is, on a man bag, and you'll see it has 6 fingers right there. So you have this representation associated with hybrids, with supernaturals, with giants, with the lost race. In fact, I'm a believer in the collective unconscious, that we're sharing one mind, as much as we probably don't like it at some point. But these ideas keep getting dredged up and looked at and represented. And there was this idea of a parent race. In fact, Anne Rice, she wrote a series where there was a parent race with 6 fingers. And I know that's fiction, but these ideas, they seem to make sense that of all I've showed you, all the divine attributes, all the statues, the fertility goddesses and the giants, and the places of emergence, it seems like there is a story here. And it's even shows up in art. 6 fingers here, 6 toes on St. John the Baptist in this painting. The first Adam in the Bible was actually androgynous. The second was human. And right here, Jan van Scorel, 1540, his painting. It's well noted this has 6 fingers. It's just a tough picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So androgynous beings are also associated with this. Like at the Temple of Esna, Khnum created humans on a potter's wheel, just like Viracocha of the earth, and Fu Shui and Nuwa in China, these androgynous creator gods. And this Temple of Esna is dedicated to an androgynous god. He is known to be this androgynous being, and he is portrayed as having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fingers. And on the other side of the ocean, we have our friend Viracocha, and here's Tiwanaku. Viracocha is right here. Now, he is well known to be androgynous. Google androgyny and Viracocha, you will find the old stories. He is thought to be a giant and a survivor of a lost civilization who emerges from Lake Titicaca. So there is a vase that Maurice Cottrell wrote about in The Lost Tomb of Viracocha, and it has a bas-relief with 6 fingers, and it looks like this one here. I can't find the original. Maurice hasn't sent to me yet, but I do know that Viracocha is represented in the German museum, and he has 6 toes on his right foot, and he's basically portrayed as a hybrid being. So, what do you make of all this? What do I make of all this? I really feel like, if you're an academic, you can pick away at pieces of this, but it's tough to start talking about hybrids and gods and the supernatural and be taken seriously. So, I like to think of myself as a goodwill ambassador from the lunatic fringe, and I just try to piece together this information and tell a mythological tale about our past. And I think there's something to this. It is well beyond coincidence. That's what really gets me. I'm not, I don't have any skin in the game, like, I got to prove this case, or, I have to defend my position endlessly. I think any rational person strapped down to a chair and forced to listen to me talk about this for an hour will say, there's something to the story. I don't know truly what it is, but it seems like, you know, there's something here. And like I said at the beginning, this resonates with some people, and some people just don't want any part to do with these controversial subjects. I'll just say, you know, if you have an open-minded orientation around it, and you start looking and you start searching museums and ancient sites, you hear a different story. So I appreciate your time, and I'm glad to share this strange information with you.